So I thought it'd be good to take a minute and talk about, historic elements and specifically restoring and building a historic home and what you need to do in terms of the clapboards. So I've invited my guest along to describe.
Yes, thank you. And these are solid cedar clapboards that are 1 by 4 inches wide, and they're finished off. At the lower section, the spacing is down to about 1 1/4 inches. And the reason that they did that was to provide a thicker butt and a thicker board where the water would be shedding most commonly. Up above, higher up, there's less water that sheds on the clapboards, so you can stretch them out. These are nailed with nails into the studs. However, this is a 250-year-old house, and oftentimes the nails during the wintertime will pop, and you can see that in fact there's nothing holding the nail. So the only thing that you can do is inject epoxy into the stud and then hammer the nail in. That's the only correction there. Or you can put a toothpick
To jam it,
and jam
to wedge it.
Right.
So you had told me about the proper technique for basically setting the depth on these.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit in terms of what you want to do versus what you don't want to do?
Yes. When you nail cedar clapboard, you want to just compress the surface, leaving the nail head slightly proud. If you hammer these in so that they're flush, you will end up cracking the cedar and crushing the fibers of the wood, which then will rot out.
Which you can see an example of this. Too deep.
Too deep, too deep.
Too deep. Better.
And over here is perfect. It's okay, it's okay. Maybe a little deep. And if you look at the discoloration here, that's water that gets into the fibers, the broken fibers of the clapboard, and it eventually discolors the paint, and then the paint will delaminate. Here's one, this is more advanced, where it actually broke up the surface of the clapboard. So you don't want to do anything to break the fibers of the surface of the clapboard. You just want to compress and hold the clapboard. This requires a skilled carpenter to apply, otherwise they'll smash every nail and every clapboard, and in 2 years you'll be repainting and puttying everything in sight.
What's the material that's most often used for wooden clapboards?
Well, this is historic Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the traditional material actually is pine, but that does not last around here. So most of the clapboards applied today are cedar, red cedar, and you have a choice of either finger jointed red cedar or solid cedar boards.
And what can you expect in terms of maintenance for a painted cedar clapboard exterior?
Well, this is the south side of this building, and to keep this in good condition, it requires completely repainting it about every 3 years. On the west or north side of the house is about every 5 years.
And that's, again, because of the sun damage.
Right. The sun very quickly causes heating and expansion, and then during the wintertime, shrinkage of the actual board, which then causes the paint to fail. Direct UV also fades the paint. So if you look up here, you can see where this is actually starting to come off, and this needs a light sanding, and theoretically you should prime it with an oil-based primer and then repaint it in your original color. And this is faded at least 2 shades from the original color, so we can touch this up, but it'll look like a leopard when we're done. So you need to touch it up and then repaint the entire side.
Repaint the entire side.
Yes. And finally, I want to point out a detail of the narrow boards at the very bottom above what is called the barge board, and this is actual lead that is curled over the edge. This particular barge board has about a 45-degree cut on the edge, and so when you apply your lead, you need to use a roller or some other device to actually form the lead to the 45-degree cut on the barge board.
Do you ever see copper being used on the bottom? Because I know that's used often in flashing. Is there a specific reason why lead is used here?
Here in the historic district, your lead is more easily formed to the wood, and it's the traditional material. You can use copper, and many people do. It's actually easier to install, but this is the tradition.
So there you have it. That's the 411 on historic clapboards on a historic home and how to properly install and maintain.
In Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
In Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Now, of course, there are different areas that are going to require different things, but in the Northeast we have a lot of heat and then cold, a lot of rain, etc. So
and here the moisture content in the air is in that 40 to 75% on the average year in and year out, and that high humidity also causes the paint to fail.
like, comment, and subscribe.